Last week we learned about Israel being taken captive into Babylon and the need for somebody to stand up in the face of idol worship. And we looked at the story of Daniel and the Hebrew boys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they stood up to King Nebuchadnezzar and said, "We will not worship your idols." And we saw it's important to stand up in the midst of Babylon. Today, we're going to fast forward just about 100 years. We're just going to go fast forward about 100 years or so to the Jewish people still in this region of the world, still in Persia. And by this time, they had been allowed to go home. Cyrus the Great had come along, and he had sent the people back to rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. But not everybody went home. Some of the Jews stayed in Persia, and they chose to live there it's like, hey, we've been here for 70-something years. Our family's here, our house is here. And we now have our freedom here. Let's go ahead and just live here. Let's just stay here. We don't know what Jerusalem's going to be like. And so they chose to be a part of that world, to stay at their homes, to live peacefully. And they were a minority in Persia. And that's where we're going to pick up our story today, in the land of Persia, which is Iran today, in this case. And we're going to begin in the book of Esther. Now, you may think, well, Esther's a weird story to preach on Father's Day because that's about a girl. Yes. But there is a father figure in it. We'll see how this goes. Tamara was questioning my thinking of, why would you preach on Esther? I'm not preaching on Esther, I'm preaching out of Esther. The story of Esther, and there is the father figure in it. We'll get there. Esther chapter 1. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the third year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and the governors of the provinces were before him. And so this is the king is telling you who he is and where he is and which king he is. And this is Xerxes. If you study history, the Bible calls him Ahasuerus. The Bible gives different names for people to say this is their name, but they also had this name. In this case, Ahasuerus is also known as Xerxes, and that's how I'm going to refer to him, unless I'm reading from the scriptures and it says his name. I was going to call him Xerxes because I like the sound of Xerxes. And it's easier to say than Ahasuerus. More syllables. Xerxes. You may have heard of Xerxes. Not only did he have a couple of X's in his name, he reigned from 486 BC to 465 BC. So this is several hundred years before Jesus. He reigned in a city called Susa, and you can go to Susa today. It's not called Susa anymore. It's called Shush. It's in Iran, and it is the modern-day story. And so you can go there and walk the ruins of his palace. You can walk where Esther walked. You can say, this is the path she took to the throne room, and you can walk right where she was. In the story that as we begin to read the story here, we see that Xerxes threw a party for 6 months. That's quite a party. I don't know. They might call it lit today. I know. Isn't that great whenever a 50-year-old uses 10-year-old language? Yeah. We know about Xerxes through a historian named Herodotus. And Herodotus tells us a little bit more than what the Bible does in this circumstance. The Bible tells us a story that's kind of building up to Esther and what she did. And Herodotus tells the story from the lens of Xerxes, so his side of the story, if you will. And we learn that this party that he throws for 6 months is actually something historical. Xerxes called together all these different officials to try and get them on his side because he wanted to go to war with Greece. So this is actually a wooing, if you will, of all these officials. We're going to have you a great party. We're going to feed you great food. We're going to wine you. We're going to dine you. We're going to play lots of games. We're going to do all these amazing things. You're going to love me. And then I'm going to say, let's go to war. And you're going to say yes. It was a political thing. And so during these festivities, and I'm summarizing these chapters. You can read Esther, by the way, for your homework later this week to get all the details. But during the festivities, Herodotus says that Xerxes was bragging about the beauty of his wife. All the men were comparing their women. Well, our women are the most beautiful. Our women are the most beautiful, and so on and so on. You know how men are, okay? And without the Holy Spirit, savages. So they're comparing wives. Well, the king, Xerxes, says, my wife is the most beautiful, and to prove it, I will summon her, and then you can see for yourself. And so he calls for Vashti to come, only wearing her crown. I told you he was a savage. Yeah. Well, Vashti says, no, I'm not doing that. And that embarrassed the king. And, so now he's looking bad and for all these men that he's trying to get on his side so he can go to war against Greece, his wife embarrasses him. And so he put out a decree. This is what kings do. This vicious guy. He says, look, I can't let all the other women get ideas about what they can do with their men. They can't just start denying their husbands and saying no to their husbands. So he decreed across the entire empire that she would never be allowed to see him again. You're not going to be the queen anymore. You're cast out of my sight. Never will see you again. And so that's how essentially Esther chapter 1 ends. Okay, so fantastic setup, isn't it? Great. So after this, again, reading from Herodotus right now, because we'll get to Esther chapter 2, but between Esther chapter 1 and Esther chapter 2, there's this gap of several years, and something important happens in history. Herodotus tells us that this is when Xerxes went to Greece to wage war. And he began his invasion of Greece. His first major clash was at a place called Thermopylae. Any men in the house know anything about Thermopylae? Any historians? Okay, a couple of you. All right. Thermopylae is famous for another king, Leonidas, and his men, the Spartans. And 300 Spartans and King Leonidas met at the gates of fire, Thermopylae, and fought with this invading force from Persia and withstood them for multiple days until they finally succumbed to the overwhelming force of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Persians. An incredible story of warfare. And all the men, when you go and go, what book should I get this year? Go get The Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield. It's an older book, historical fiction, but it'll make you feel like a man. Okay? Man. They all die, but they die manly. He defeated the Spartans in this now legendary battle, but he went on to lose the war. And in disgrace, Herodotus says that he returned to his palace in Susa, and when he returned to his palace, he was looking for his wife, but he could not have her come to it because he had made a decree, and the king could not undo the decree. And so he's like, I need a new wife. This is, Herodotus talks about this. And so this is where we pick up in Esther chapter 2. This is the Bible's take on it. It says this in Esther chapter 2, verse 1. It says, after these things, this war with Greece that embarrassed him even further, put him in a foul mood, and he had to deal with all this. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. And then the king's young men who attended him said, we need some beautiful young virgins to be sought out for the king. Let's find you some women. So the king appointed officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa, the citadel. He's not a Christian, let's say. He's collecting these young ladies. He says, let's get them together in the harem under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given to them. In other words, get them and then pretty them all up, and then let's see them. And so let the young women who please the king be queen instead of Vashti. Well, this was a great idea to the king, and so he did that. Now, there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite. And he had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives with Jeconiah, the king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. They're catching you up on the story. So the king, bad guy, he does some crazy stuff. He goes to war. He loses. He comes back. I need a wife. And so he starts collecting women from all over his kingdom. And in the middle of this is this man named Mordecai, who had been carried away into captivity by Nebuchadnezzar. And he, Mordecai, was bringing up Hadassah. Now, Hadassah is also known as Esther. the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. Obviously, she had a father at some point. She had a mother at some point. They had died. And this young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her mother and father died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Here's the father figure. So you have a young lady who is beautiful, who doesn't have a mom or a dad, and you have a father figure that takes her in and says, I will raise you as my own. So important. But when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in the custody of Haggai. Esther was also taken into the king's palace. She was taken. It wasn't something they went along with willingly. You're walking in the streets and they go, you're a good-looking girl, come with me. The king be interested. And then you went because you know what happens if you don't go with the king. He's a bad guy. Bad guy. And so Esther's taken into custody, and now she's gathered together with all these young ladies. And in verse 9, the young woman pleased him, that's Esther, pleased the king, and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with cosmetics, her portion of food, and 7 chosen young women from the king's palace. I'm going to give you some servants. I'm going to advance her and your young women to the best place in the harem. Now, Esther had not made known her people. He didn't know that she was Jewish. He didn't know her kindred. He didn't know that her family had come here in the captivity. Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. He's like, look, you got to be protected. If you say what you are, then it might not go well for you. And I'm trying to keep you alive. And so every day, Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. He's the father figure. He's like, what is happening to this girl that I have raised? I know she's in there, and so he's always listening, always talking to the people that come in and going, have you heard from Esther? How's she doing? Is she okay? Cares. Well, we go on to read the story, and you'll find that Esther, as all these young ladies to have their time with the king, Esther gets chosen as the king's favorite, and he makes her the queen. Amazing. Here's this young Jewish girl who now has been brought in as the queen underneath Xerxes. In these days, Esther 2:21 says that Mordecai was sitting in the king's gate. Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Now, there's a couple of people who work for the king that are not happy with him, and they say, the best thing to do with the king is probably just to kill him. This happened a lot, by the way. I don't know if you ever read history, but lots of kings had to worry about getting killed by lots of people. And so if you made the king mad, you had to be careful who your servants were, because while you were sleeping, they might just come in and suffocate you or kill you or stab you or poison you or whatever. It was a very common thing. So they were plotting in the darkness, and Mordecai hears them because he's outside the court of the harem, and he hears these eunuchs talking, and he says, something has to be done. And so when this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, this is verse 22 of Esther 2, he told this to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. She said, look, I've got this father figure in my life. His name is Mordecai. He's always outside checking on me, and this is what he heard. And so it was investigated, and when it was found to be so, the men were hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. So this gets written down. I'm just telling you the story. It's unfolding for us right now. And Mordecai teaches us something in this moment. Now, this is a Jewish man, a God-fearing man. He hears that the king is going to be killed, and the king's not a good guy. But the king has taken Esther to be his queen. And so Mordecai is thinking, I know he's a bad guy, but I don't want him to die. That's not good, that treason would be committed like this. And so Mordecai teaches something. Not every decision that's made, because he does the right thing, he informs the king. Not every decision that is made requires a prayer meeting. Let me go off on a little tangent here. You're going to find this with this story. I'm going to tell the story, but there's lots of little tangents we'll just kind of pull from here. Not every decision you make in life requires you to be in a prayer meeting to make the decision. And I know you go, well, you're a pastor, you're supposed to pray about everything. Yes, you should pray about everything. You should pray every day. You should bring all your anxieties to God. But in the moment, in the heat of the moment, when you got to make a decision quickly, you don't necessarily have to stop and pray about things that are the right thing to do. There are things that God has already said in his word that are still true, whether you pray about them or not. So you just do the right thing. You do what God would have you do. And so it's funny to me, you'll find people like this. Sometimes they'll say, well, I'm praying about forgiving that person. I'm praying about it. You should be praying that you can, not whether you should. I'm praying about whether I'll serve in church. You should. That's if you look in the scriptures, you don't find people not serving in the church. Well, I'm praying if I'm going to be part of that small group or not. No, you go get in the small group. Be discipled. It's biblical. It's a biblical model for being together with other believers and learning together. Well, and so what we find out is that I'm praying about it becomes sort of a smokescreen that we give ourselves for other phrases that we don't like to say. Like, I don't want to do that. So I'll pray about it. I don't want to obey that part of the scripture, so I'll pray about it. I don't want to have that responsibility. I don't want to be accountable, so I'll pray about it. Well, you don't have to pray about certain things. In this case, Mordecai doesn't need to pray for what should I do. He just does the right thing, and that's awesome. Thank you, Mordecai, for that. He does the right thing, and the Bible just kind of mentions it and moves on, and it seems like everybody forgets about it. Then we get to Esther chapter 3. But it doesn't, so just hold on to that. In Esther chapter 3, we have this sneaky, sly, flattering snake of a man who gets introduced, named Haman. And Haman connives his way into the king's favor and becomes the prime minister, essentially, of the nation. So it's sort of the second hand of the king, if you will. And as he's wearing his royal robes and wearing his royal ring and walking with his royal arrogance through the streets, everyone bows down to Haman. And he loves it. He loves when people acknowledge who he is. Oh, here comes Haman. Everyone bow your head. Good morning, Haman. How are you, Haman? Goodbye, Haman. He's a snake in the grass. They don't say that out loud, but they might think it. Everybody knows, but they're going to bow to him. And he loves that, except for a certain Jew. Can anybody guess the name of the Jew who will not bow to him? Mordecai. And I don't know, there's a theme here, right? I mean, maybe Mordecai is thinking of the Hebrew boys. You know, they wouldn't bow back then. I'm not bowing to anybody else either. Like, I only bow to God. That's who I bow to. I'm not bowing down to Haman. And this made Haman mad, furious. And he plotted and he planned and he put together a terrible idea. He went to the king and he sweet-talked the king into issuing another decree to destroy all the Jewish people. He said, you know, there's these people that they're just terrible people. You don't want them in this country. And he'd tell all these things about them. And, really, we should just wipe them out. And the king's like, sounds good to me. Make it so. And the whole time, Haman's like, I'm going to have all of them wiped out just so that I can pick one that I'm going to kill myself, Mordecai. I want Mordecai. Everybody's going to start wiping out the Jews on this particular day, and so I pick Mordecai. That's what I want. This is just how wicked of a man he is. I'm going to wipe out a whole people just so I get a reason to go after one guy. When the Jews and Mordecai, of course, learn about this decree, they begin to fast. They begin to weep. They begin to lament. And I think this is a good time to bring up this point about the book of Esther. The book of Esther has a unique place in the Bible because it doesn't mention God anywhere. His name is not there. No, there's not a prayer to him that's recorded there. No one talks about God, and yet he's through the whole thing. It's an interesting book. When you read it the first time and you realize it's like, where is God in this? Why is this even in the Bible? Well, God's all in it. And so there's no prophet, there's no miracle, there's no visions, no angels, no burning bushes, no Red Sea parting, and yet God is everywhere in it. And I want you to realize this today, that we'll see this in the story of Esther, that your life doesn't have to have all those amazing, incredible things happening all the time for you to know that God is in it. He orchestrates behind the scenes. He's always at work. We know this because we see the people lamenting. What is lament? Lament is a form of prayer. It's a sad prayer. It's a, oh God, what are we going to do prayer. It's God, why is this happening to us prayer. Oh God, when are you going to deliver us kind of prayer. I don't know if you ever prayed those kinds of prayers. But those are prayers. They're real prayers, and they're biblical. Don't let anybody ever tell you that to pray that way means that you don't have any faith. Oh, you must have less faith because you're crying about it or you're worried about it. Well, you bring your worries to God. That's a legitimate prayer. And sometimes when you come to God and you try to put your worries on him, there's so many worries that the first time you give him your worries, they didn't all go. So you got to come back and do it again and again and again and again until he delivers you. That is a valid form of prayer, and that is worship to God. Can I tell you, when you come to God with your lament, with your sorrow, with your grief, with your pain, you come to him, and you're not complaining. Even if you are complaining, you're complaining to the guy that can do it. You're complaining to the one who can control it. You're complaining to the one who understands. You're complaining to the right place. And that's a form of worship because you go there and you say, I know you're in control. I'm not in control. You are. That's worship. You're putting God right where he belongs to be, at the top, in control. And so who are the people lamenting to? God. I told you, they don't mention his name in this book. And yet there he is. So Mordecai sends a message to Esther through one of her eunuchs, Hathach. And he says to her, you've got to do something. Esther, this decree has come out from the king. He's going to wipe all the Jews out. You've got to do something. And in Esther chapter 4, we're just moving right on through the story. Esther chapter 4, verse 10, Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go back to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death. In other words, if you just go to the king, whether you're a man or you're a woman, it doesn't matter who you are. If you just go into the inner court of the king, you're dead. Unless the king holds out his golden scepter. That's my only hope. Like if I go in there, he's got to hold out the scepter to me or I'm dead. And she says, but as for me, I've not even been called to come in to see the king for 30 days. I haven't seen him in a month. He's not interested in me right now. Maybe they had a little spat. Maybe they had a little, I don't know. But he's like, I haven't needed to see Esther for a while. So they told Mordecai what Esther had said. If I go in, he'd kill me. And he's not really wanting to see me either. It's like, it'd be different if I just saw him yesterday. It'd be different if we had an appointment on the calendar for tomorrow. I don't even know what he's up to. So they told Mordecai what Esther had said, and here we get some fatherly straight talk. I don't know if you ever received some fatherly straight talk. It's important for fathers to give their kids some straight talk. And it's important that you love your kids, that you work hard to provide for your kids, to pray for your kids, to tell your kids the truth. It doesn't always have to be blunt, but it does have to be straight. And Mordecai speaks straight to Esther right now. He says, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, verse 13. Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. If you think that you can keep yourself safe and everybody else out here will just be killed, don't think that you will be safe. If you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And that's a famous passage right there. It's like, oh, you may have been raised up, Esther, just for a time like this. And it does what it's supposed to do. It's that pep talk, that fatherly straight talk, like you've got to do this. I know that you can do this. You must do this. Esther told them to go reply back to Mordecai. Go and gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf. I want you to fast for me. I know you're fasting for yourselves. Now I want you to fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Well, she's had quite a dramatic shift there. And this is where I want to key in today because this is a pivotal moment, a dramatic moment, a very dangerous moment for Esther. And it's pretty loaded for each of us because I want you to see what Mordecai says. I know anytime you hear Esther preach, it's always, you've been raised up for such a time as this. I want to go a little bit before that. I want you to kind of see this in a different light. I want you to see what Mordecai says. He says, if you keep silent, if you don't do anything, Esther, if you don't step up, deliverance will come from another place. Now, I want you to think about this. What we know about the book of Esther, nobody's heard from God. Nobody's prophesied anything. God's name is not even mentioned here, but Mordecai is confident. Why? Because Mordecai remembered some things. Remember, he came in the captivity. He was taken out of the land of Israel. And he knows that God made promises to his people a long time ago to their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Mordecai believes that God will keep his promises. And so let me dig into this for just a moment. I'll give you the mindset of Mordecai. I know that God will keep his promises. So Esther, if you don't step up, he will still get the job done. I need you to understand this about God. Let me get a little theological for you. Let's just dig into this. God has this attribute that the scholars call aseity. If you're writing it down, A-S-E-I-T-Y, aseity. And all that means is that he exists without any external cause. The aseity of God means that he exists because he exists. That's it. So he doesn't need anything. There is nothing that God needs in order to be God. God, going further, is omnipotent. That means all powerful. He has the power and the ability to do anything, and he doesn't need anything to do anything. When he spoke and said, "Let there be light," there was not anything, and then suddenly there was. Everything came because he commanded it to be. Ex nihilo, out of nothing came everything because of God. So he has aseity. He is because he is. And he has omnipotence. He can do anything with nothing. So when I say that, I want you to understand that God does not need my help. God does not need your help. God does not require anyone's assistance to do anything that he wants to do. Isaiah 44:6, this is God speaking. He says, "I am the first and I am the last, and beside me there is no God." There's nobody else like me. I don't need anybody's help. I'm God. That's what he's saying. And this is one of the great mysteries of God, is that God could do it all himself, and yet he invites us into his work. I can do it, but I want you to do it with me. Why? I don't know. He's God. He doesn't have to explain that to me. And so the question for Mordecai, who understands this, is not, will God act? Will God keep his promise? But rather, will Esther participate in the promise? Will Esther step up and say, "I will do God's will. I will be a vessel for God to use. I will be a participant in what God is doing in the world." That's the real question. And so he says, "Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" This is not a prophecy. This is not some vision that he has seen. It's a possibility. He sees potential. He sees and recognizes that God is always at work. And so I don't want you to listen to anyone that tries to tell you that God's not in the book of Esther. His name is never mentioned, but Esther is the story of God orchestrating everything, even when he doesn't appear to be orchestrating anything. So important. So let's take a look at Esther for just a moment, shall we? It's Mordecai is trying to rally her and does, and says, you've got to go. God's going to do it a different way if you don't, but maybe he'll use you in such a time as this. And so Esther says, "All right, if I die, I die. Let's go." I mean, there's people that have died for the cause of Christ, and then their stories spark other people to do great things. Maybe that's how it's going to be. And so let's take a look at Esther. She's beautiful. We know that. The Bible is very clear about that. She was beautiful. She's Jewish. She's an orphan. That's about it. She's a beauty queen. And we don't know what her talents were. You know, you go to the beauty pageants and they all have a talent. We don't know what her talent was. All we know is she's Jewish, beautiful, and an orphan. And that's it. She has no prophetic gift that we know about. She has no spiritual resume. She has no miracles given to her name. She has no great accomplishments to her name. She's just a young woman who finds herself in a position that she never asked to be in. She didn't choose Persia. That's where she was born. She didn't choose to be married to Xerxes. He took her. She didn't choose to live in the palace. She was put there. She finds herself there with no real reason as to why. But her parents named her Hadassah, which means the myrtle tree. A myrtle tree is a tree that grows and brings beauty, thriving in hard and rocky places where there doesn't seem to be any hope, doesn't seem to be any life. The myrtle tree springs up between the cracks in the rocks and flourishes there. So her parents had some kind of idea when she was born, because people picked their names back then, not because they sounded nice, but because of what they meant. And now she has a father figure in Mordecai who sees the same potential. And that's what fathers do. We see the potential of our children. Tamara wants the boys to be babies as long as possible. I want them to grow up as fast as possible. Not so they can get out of my house and leave me alone, so they can be men. I can see them succeed. I can see them do and accomplish. And Tamara wants that too, but she just prefers the baby part. That's what fathers do. And Mordecai is doing what good fathers do. He pushes and he pulls the best out of his kid. How do you know if you're a good dad? Let's just take that little tangent. This is Father's Day. Because if you're a good father, you do your best to succeed in life for your kids. And then you push them to succeed beyond you. And I'm not talking just about sports and business and wealth, and all that's fine. I'm talking about faith. So here's Mordecai, a faithful man, and he's modeled this faith for Esther over the years. And now he's calling to her to do in faith what he can't do. You've got to do what I can't do. I would do it if I could, but I can't. You've got to do it. You've got to go beyond what I can do. Go, Esther. God's writing a story, Esther. You get to play a part, Esther. So go, Esther. Don't let fear stop you. Do it anyway, Esther. You've got to go and do what I can't do. He's trying to get her to the place where she says, she comes to this recognition, whether I live or I die, I realize that God's going to use somebody. And if God's going to use somebody, it's going to be me. That's what he's trying to put in her. If God's going to use somebody, and he will, then it's going to be me. And we've got to get that mindset too. If God's going to do something through somebody, then somebody needs to step forward. And the question really is it going to be me? Somebody's going to share their testimony and encourage that person who needs it. It's going to be me. Somebody needs to step in and pray with that hurting person right now. They need to hear somebody praying over them right now. It's going to be me. Somebody is going to step up and disciple that young person. Somebody's going to be a mentor to that young believer. Well, it's going to be me. Somebody's going to start the reconciliation process in this broken relationship. I'm not going to sit around and wait. It's going to be me. Somebody's going to write that book. Somebody's going to go on that missions trip. Somebody's going to start that new ministry. Somebody's going to step in and help in a time of need. It's going to be me. We've got to have that attitude. And fathers, today God is going to do something great in your kids. You need to know that. God is at work in the lives of your children. I know that because you have them in the house of the Lord. And so he's at work in their lives. And you're in the house of the Lord. So I know that he's for your kids. And somebody has to raise them to follow him. Somebody has to raise them to trust him. Somebody has to know how to obey him. Somebody has to know how to hold on to God when everything is going rough and it's hard to hold on. And so somebody's got to do it. So what do you say? It's going to be me. It's going to be me. When we get this attitude, the whole church changes. When we get this attitude of, it's going to be me. God's going to do something, well, it's going to be me. Families will change and cities will change when people stop saying, well, somebody should fill in the blanks. And they start saying, nobody else is going to get my blessing. Nobody else is going to take my ability to participate in the things of God. It's going to be me. It's going to be me. Somebody point to yourself and say, it's going to be me. Let's stand in the room today. Worship team, you can come. I'll give you the rest of the story of Esther. You can, again, read this for homework later and find God moving in some other places. But Esther decided, I will go before the king, and so she did. She got all dressed up. She fasted for 3 days, and she got all dressed up, and she went into the throne room looking fine. And the king accepted her. He extended the golden scepter to her. I haven't seen you in over a month. I've forgotten how beautiful you were. Here's my golden scepter. Please come closer. And so she threw a banquet for him. He loved parties. He threw him a party. King, I came to you today because I wanted to throw you a party. And through this party that went on for multiple days, she ended up exposing Haman for the wicked man that he was and his plot, and revealed herself to be Jewish. And the king's like, well, I'm not going to lose you. So we'll issue a different kind of decree. And Haman ends up being killed on the gallows that he had designed for Mordecai. Mordecai, the king remembered, had helped him. Mordecai, you remember, was a faithful man, a wise man, a God-fearing man. So Mordecai becomes the second in command to the king. He becomes known and trusted by the king. In fact, you can read Persian records from back in those days, and you'll see that all throughout records of those days, there's a name called Mardukah, which is the Persian version of Mordecai. I don't know if it's the same Mordecai, but it could be. And because of this victory, because the Jews were not destroyed, because God delivered through Esther at the promptings of her father figure, Mordecai, the Jews instituted a feast day that we still remember today called Purim. It's still celebrated today. And Esther found her way into the heroes of the faith. Here's how we're going to wrap it up today. This book of Esther is not ultimately about Esther. It's got her name on it, but it's not really about her. Because Esther didn't save Israel. God saved Israel. But Esther participated. God was doing something incredible, and Esther chose to be a part. And that's the invitation to you today. That's what I want you to see out of it, that God is already at work. And then you say, well, I haven't seen any prophecies. Haven't seen any visions. Haven't heard any angels singing. God's at work. He is a great orchestrator of every detail. You'll read the story of Esther, you'll find out that the king couldn't sleep. And so he said, I know what I'll do. I'll get the royal records read to me. That'll put me to sleep. Well, why he couldn't sleep? The Bible doesn't say it. It just kind of insinuates it. He couldn't sleep because God's going, you can't sleep yet. I'm working. I'm orchestrating something. I orchestrated a sleepless night, so you'll read the records and see Mordecai helped you. He told you that somebody was trying to try to kill you, and so that moved the king to save the Jews. God is orchestrating everything, down to the sleepless nights. So there's not really a question of will God move? Will God do something? Is God at work? No, we see in the story of Esther, that's already answered. The question is, will you participate? Will you say, somebody needs to do it? Or will you say, God's going to do it, and he's going to do it for me? If somebody gets to do it, it's going to be me. Not because God needs you, because God is inviting you into whatever he's already doing. And I don't know what that is. Maybe right now, I'm going to pray over you, and we're going to go back into worship and have a time where you just respond to the Lord and let him speak to you of, I want you to be engaged in this. I'm calling you, I'm inviting you into this process to bring healing, to bring restoration, to bring reconciliation, to step into life with me, to step into what I'm doing. And so today, you may not have ever stepped into life with God, but you can. The Bible calls that repentance. That's when you choose to stop living your way and start living God's way. You can say, you know what, if God is really up to something in the world, if God really is going to take people back to be with him in eternity, I want to be in that. I don't want somebody else to get that and me not. I want to do that. You can do it. You can repent. You can change your mind, and you can tell God, I want to follow you. You can do that here as we worship. And if that is you, you need to let me know before you leave today that you have decided to turn your life to God and follow after him. And we will point you then to your next steps the waters of baptism, being filled with his Holy Spirit, because what you're doing is aligning yourself with him, stepping in and participating in the eternal life that he has and is offering to you. As always, if you have any needs today, if you need somebody to pray with you, you can step to the front as we worship, and we will meet you for prayer and pray over your need with you. But let's let the Lord speak to us right now, and let's speak to God. God, what is it that you're doing? God, where is it that you're wanting me to step in? God, where is it that you're inviting me to participate in something that maybe I've been thinking, well, somebody else will do that. Well, somebody else might do. No, but I need to make the decision today. If you're going to do something in that, it's going to be me that you work through. We're going to take that attitude today. Let's worship. If you have a need, please come. Let's worship together and let the Lord speak to us. And let's leave here today with the attitude of God's at work and he needs somebody. It's going to be me. Thank you, Jesus.